Welcome to Prime Life. We call it Retirement 2.0. Leave each episode with tips and new ideas to help you navigate retirement in our new age. It's your time. Make it count.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not intended as medical, investment, or financial advice. We do not sponsor or endorse any of the individuals, companies, products, or services featured on this podcast. Any statements or opinions expressed are of the individual who makes them. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Prime Life podcast. I'm Mary Crean, and I'm super excited today. We have quite a guest. I'm very excited to introduce him, so I think I'm just going to go ahead and do that. His name is John Ensley. He's the founder and president of J. Ensley Financial, a registered investment advisor firm in Washington State. John holds a chartered financial consultant designation and operates as a fiduciary advisor, providing guidance on topics such as maximizing Social Security benefits, minimizing taxes, optimizing retirement income, and the bank on yourself concept. John, welcome to the Prime Life podcast. I'm super excited to have you explain a little bit about that. So let's, without further ado, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Happy to, Mary. Thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. I founded J. Ensley Financial in 2012, really out of experiences and observations that I had coming out of the dot-com crash in the early 2000s, and then in the mid 2000s, the quote unquote Great Recession with the housing bubble and so forth. And so some personal experiences, as well as just observing a lot of pain and a lot of chaos and a lot of disruption for a lot of people. And that all kind of acted as a wake up call for me, and got me to start reading and studying and learning everything I could about the reasons behind those events and economics and a lot of different things. And what came out of all that was really two big lessons for me. And one was the smartest people in the room really have no idea what's going to happen. Right? These things are pretty unpredictable. And if they can't know what's going to happen, then certainly most average people don't know what's going to happen. So we really have to be prepared for whatever happens. And at the time, I was kind of ready for a career change, and I had done all this study and decided that I wanted to go into a field where I felt I could make a difference, that I did work every day that actually mattered and would improve people's lives. And so that led me into financial services. I started out as an insurance only licensed professional, and eventually expanded from there. And so amazing to me. I've been doing this for over a dozen years now, and I love what I do, and I'm honored to be here and share as much great information as I can share.
Yeah, thank you. John, I have so many questions, and so maybe we'll have to have you back. Really, a lot is swimming through my mind. First of all, I love what you said about smartest people in the room and they can't predict. That all said, where do you meet someone in terms of when they say, like, okay, should I start planning now for retirement? When is the best time? Is it too early? Is it too late? How do you kind of meet someone when they're asking you all of those questions? And sometimes they're not even asking them, but they're thinking them, and they're sometimes not feeling so great about themselves. Not everyone. So I'd love for you to kind of talk a little bit about how you approach that.
Absolutely, happy to. So there's an old proverb that says the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the next best time is today. And I think that applies to financial planning in particular, right? There's definitely no too early, no such thing as too early, but there's also really no such thing as too late. Although there's kind of a caveat there, right? The closer we get to down the road, the more critical it is that we start. So there's really no too early, but if you haven't started, start today, wherever you are on that timeline. And I think with when people approach me with kind of those questions, that's really what it is. There's always something we can start planning now, wherever now is. And so let's get started.
No, I think that makes sense. And I think some people are a little bit afraid sometimes because they're like, well, maybe I've waited too long and there's just no hope for me. So I love that there is hope, and you can, again, obviously adjust your advice depending on where someone is in their journey. But I'm very curious, and I'm sure others are, when I mentioned early on when I introduced you, bank on yourself concept. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and why we should know about that?
And we'll get that answer after a brief word from our commercial sponsors.
NASA is always working harder to be your carrier of choice. We offer insurance products that can help you meet your retirement goals, such as protecting your savings, securing lifetime income, or paying for healthcare costs. We're dedicated to providing best-in-class service and are keeping things simple, and we'll have your back. We have around 400,000 policyholders and contract holders and have been doing this for a long time, 170 years, but we remain humble enough to always try to improve. For more information, visit nfg.com. Nassau insurance products are issued by Nassau Life and Annuity Company of Hartford, Connecticut, Nassau Life Insurance Company, East Greenbush, New York, or Nassau Life Insurance Company of Kansas, Overland Park, Kansas. Subsidiaries of Nassau Financial Group. Products are not available in all areas. Policyholder counts are for all Nassau companies as of September 30th, 2022, and are subject to change.
Yeah, you bet. So bank on yourself. I get that question a lot when I put that in there, and it's bank on yourself is a life insurance based concept where we use cash value life insurance policies to build up cash accumulation, and then use the life insurance policy loan aspect of those policies as a source of financing for whether it's investments, major purchases, whatever the case may be, as well as retirement planning. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what it is. It's using specially structured life insurance contracts as a source of financing.
No, that's great. I appreciate that, clarification, because, when you just explained it, okay, I'm like, all right, that makes total sense. I would love to talk a little bit about multi-generational planning and legacy planning and how that fits together, because I know even my own life, like as I'm getting on in years, I have two grown adults. Actually, my daughter happens to be a lawyer in the trust and estates arena, believe it or not. And we talk a lot about, and I've even found most recently that I'm starting to think even more about what kind of legacy do I really want to leave? It's not that I've never thought about it, but I feel like most recently it's really like in my head. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about kind of what that is, what that looks like, and how you bring perhaps families together. What does it mean when it's multi-generational and all kind of that good stuff?
Isn't it interesting, Mary, how that perception changes as we get older? When I talk to my 20-something kids, the furthest thing in their mind is what do I want to happen after I die, kind of scenario. And I can remember thinking that way also in my 20s. But as we get older, we start thinking about, well, okay, what am I going to leave behind? And I think it's, we just come to grips with our mortality. We realize that day is coming, hopefully a long time from now. But
right.
I think as we get older, we realize it is coming.
It's coming.
And, we should be prepared for it. And so a lot of people in my practice will say something to the effect of whatever's left, right? Whatever's left, I want to pass it on to the kids. And unfortunately, I think that's a kind of a low energy type of an answer, right? It basically says, I don't really know. So I'm just going to say that. But I think it's a couple of things. Everybody, because it's unpredictable, right? None of us can say when we're die. So everyone is more than likely going to leave something behind. And whether that's intentional or it's an accident, either way, something's going to get left behind. And I think where planning comes in is understanding that we can make that as efficient as possible, that transfer, that legacy that we leave for future generations. We can make it as efficient as possible. And if we do the right planning early enough, we can actually make it very intentional what happens with those future generations, and we can set those future generations up for really fantastic success if we get started on it. And that's the thing I think is the thought process. Instead of thinking in terms of a decade or two, when people can make that shift to think about what does this look like 50, 60, 70 years long after I'm gone. It's a very significant shift in mentality that happens when you shift those ranges out that far.
I think that's great. And I totally agree with you, because now that said, how do you, when you're meeting with individuals, like how do you help them take those baby steps, being that we know we're all going to die eventually. We don't know where or when, but how do you approach that in terms of like steps they can take? When we hear that, we're like, wow, that makes sense. Because we have also had guests on our program and they've talked about this. They've said at the end, if you don't make these decisions now, someone else will make them for you, and you may not like the decisions they make for you. So best you make some of those decisions. And I think leaving a legacy is one of them. And as we talked, so how do you start the conversation and offer, I'm going to say, baby steps in some cases?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mary. I think the biggest thing is I ask the question, right? We have to ask a lot of questions as financial professionals to find out what people want, but also kind of what the underlying motivations are with what they say they want in terms of what's motivating that desire. And so I think that's the first thing to start the question start the process is to ask the questions, right? What do you want to happen? Think about, if you were to pass away at X age, at 75, at 80, at 90, what would you want to happen? What would you want to happen for your spouse? What would you want to happen for your kids, your grandkids? What charity maybe, right? Is there something you wish you would have supported? Now you have the opportunity. And I think what it is it takes it, when you start asking questions and actually having those conversations, it takes it from this esoteric, kind of up in the clouds concept and brings it down to earth and makes it a little more real. And the more real it gets, people get more realistic about their thought process with it and more comfortable with this uncomfortable concept of I'm going to die, right? That's, we're kind of dark. We're kind of dark today, Mary.
We are. We don't mean to be, but we're a little dark. But I think what you said is spot on, because it's many of us don't want to have that conversation because we feel like we talk about it, then maybe it's going to happen. I mean, I'm saying something a little kooky, but believe me, that's crossed my mind. So, I love hearing about that. But also, as I love what you said, because I think what I'm hearing is everyone has a retirement journey. It doesn't mean we're in retirement. And some people retire and then they unretire. Because I just had a conversation with my daughter's father-in-law, and he said he's retiring, and I said, no, you're not. You're going to unretire, And he said, oh, we'll wait and see. But I would love in that same space, when think about the journey that we're on, there are so many financial implications that go along with that. So really my next question is, I would love to have you speak a little bit about what are some of the money monsters that individuals may need to think about that perhaps they haven't.
Yeah, great question. And money monsters is a term I kind of coined along the way. And it's these things that are counterproductive to our effort, right? We focus a lot on rate of return and growth and some of these things, which is good. We have to do that. But a lot of times we don't focus on the things that are actually opposing our path forward. And it's been described as an airplane flying from Seattle to New York, and it's flying at 100 miles an hour against a 150 mile an hour headwind, right? How long is it going to take to get to New York? So the plane's moving through the sky at 100 miles an hour, but it's actually moving backwards when you're from Seattle, right? So it's these forces that are opposing us, and I refer to them. It's not an exhaustive list by any means, but the list that I use is taxes, fees, crashes, which is another way of saying deflation, inflation, and debt interest. Those are the 5 things I think are critical to control and make sure that we tame those money monsters so that they don't create too big of a barrier to where we're trying to go.
Yeah, I totally agree. And again, believe it or not, there are individuals that they've thought like things through beautifully, and maybe others that haven't. And you don't know what you don't know. But on that same vein, can you talk a little bit about diversification and what that really means? Because I know we hear that a lot in not only within our own financial situation, but in business. Oh, you need to diversify. So what does that mean
Right.
to individuals? And maybe if you can give us a little bit of insight into that.
Absolutely. This is one of my favorite topics, actually, because I think it's widely misunderstood. First of all, diversification is super important. Everybody understands that, right? The more diverse positions that we hold, no matter what we do, we reduce the risk of any one thing causing a catastrophic problem. So that's good, right? All of the insurance industry, for instance, is really based on that, the law of large numbers. We can spread the risk across the many to reduce the risk to one to a negligible amount. And so that's really kind of what we're talking about. So diversification is misunderstood quite often, I think, because in the investment world, that is typically thought of as a mix of stocks and bonds. You have a 60-40 portfolio or an 80-20 portfolio or a 50-50 or whatever the ratio is. And that's thought of as a form of diversifying. And it does. It is a form of diversification. The other way it's thought about is if we just take the equities or the stock part of that portfolio, and a lot of people will believe they're diversified because they're invested across 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 different funds or stocks or whatever the case may be. And it is. That is another way to diversify. But I think where it misses the boat with diversification, speaking of in terms of financial tactics, is there should also be a diversity of accounts, is the way that I put it, so that we have multiple options. And that makes a difference when we start talking about things like retirement income. When we're going to start taking distributions, having multiple accounts gives us multiple options to be able to generate income from different sources at different times in different ways under different taxability possibilities. And that flexibility is how we can make the most efficient retirement income plan. So I think it's super, super important to understand the different types of diversification and understand where you are and where you want to be.
No, I think that was beautifully articulated, and I hadn't heard it described like that. And I know our audience is going to really love that, because I think you're right. I think it is not necessarily understood, or maybe we think of it in a very general term. And so I do appreciate that. My next question is kind of around topic that I think you probably deal with quite a bit, which is, what is provisional income and how does it impact on taxes on your social security? And we need to keep the conversation kind of light here, but just give our listeners like a very general overview of what that means.
You bet. And this is a very commonly misunderstood area. It has to do with tax. The taxability of your actual Social Security payments is based on the provisional income. And so it's actually a relatively complex topic, but it's a really simple formula that the IRS and the Social Security Administration use. And they take half of someone's Social Security benefit, and all of the ordinary income that someone might make, which would be things like W-2 income from a job or retirement account distributions, right? Those are all ordinary income. They take capital gains on any assets that were sold for a profit. And they're going to add all that together, and they're going to determine a provisional income number. And if that number is below $32,000, then 0% of the Social Security payment is taxable. If it's between $32,000 and $44,000, 50% of the Social Security payment is taxable. And if it's above $44,000, then 85% of the Social Security is taxable. So that's a very, very simplistic way to describe it. There's a lot more to it than that, but in a nutshell, that's kind of how it works. And a lot of people actually that I run into are only vaguely aware that Social Security could be taxable at all, and don't understand how. And this is where the diversity accounts we were just talking about leads directly to this, because we can affect that provisional income number based on the type of accounts that we're withdrawing from.
I think that's really interesting, and I'm glad that thank you for answering that question, because I mean, I've been at dinner parties and sometimes I'm like, Mary, be quiet, don't say anything. But you hear people like slinging information, and there's a fair amount of disinformation, I think, that goes on. Well-meaning people, very nice people, but it can be a little bit difficult sometimes to listen to. Certainly, I'm always learning every day. I am not in any way, shape, or form an expert in any of this. I really do appreciate you kind of adding some color from a very high level, for our listeners. I'm really interested in hearing a little bit about what are some of the common challenges, and I'm going to ask you for the common opportunities. So this is a two-part question that you find most individuals will come and seek your advice on. So challenges and also opportunities that you would say, most common.
So I think the most common challenge is probably just we don't have a plan, right? We've been working all these years and putting money in our 401k and our IRA and maybe a Roth IRA and we're doing all of this, but we don't know why. We don't know where it's leading. We don't really have a strategy. We're just doing it. So that's probably the number one challenge I see with a lot of people. Or perhaps they have what they think is a plan, but it's not working the way they thought it was going to work, right? So they're looking for, I'm really big on second opinions. I always suggest get a second opinion, right? I think John Hopkins did a study some time ago, and they found out that if medical errors were included in causes of death, it would be number 3 under like heart attacks and cancer, the cause of death. And so the study said, well, how do you change medical errors? Well, get a second opinion was the answer. And you can do that with your retirement plan, right? Even if you love your advisor, there's absolutely nothing wrong with getting a second opinion, just getting a second set of eyeballs on it. Absolutely recommend that. And that's where a lot of folks do come in, and they're looking for a second opinion. And so I think the opportunities then really becomes, for me, it's an educational process. I'm not the kind of advisor that says, do this, do this, do this, do this. So we go through an educational process to understand, here's where you are today, here's the factors that you really haven't considered, and here's what I would suggest to get where you're telling me you want to go.
I love that. I love the word education, because I think anytime you can arm people with education, whether it's like reading, information you provide, or just going on their own and looking at, documents, even, as it relates, to other things, Social Security, they look, on .gov, looking there, but also just, I think, talking to different advisors, if you will, and kind of, you said you could love your financial advisor, but, get a second opinion. And I really loved your analogy about the medical profession, because I could not agree with you more regarding that. So John, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, and you can pass on this question and we can move on to another one. But do you have any anecdotal stories? You don't have to, you can change the name, of anyone you've worked with and you have definitely helped that individual, because of XYZ. Can you throw out an example of someone that that you've helped make their life better?
Lots of stories. I'll put the caveat out there that this is completely hypothetical, right? Isn't related to any specific tactic or advice or anything like that. But one of my favorite stories is a gentleman that I worked with some time ago as a small business owner, and he owned fast food restaurants, and he was looking to expand, and he was very frustrated with the process for business to get a loan to expand to a new location. And I met him right around this time. He was pretty frustrated about it. And so we were able to go through a full analysis and kind of dig deep into what he had going on, and just take his existing assets and just kind of reshuffle them into some different buckets than where they were currently sitting. And this relates to the bank on yourself concept we talked about earlier, but we were essentially able to put him in a position to be his own source for that expansion. And the great thing was when he came in, he was just so frustrated. He didn't think he had any options, had any idea. And at the end of the day, right, he had everything he needed already. We just had to move it a few places and take a few tactics to get access. And then he was able to finance that whole operation on his own, open that new location. And I won't go into all the details, but it created tax benefits for his business, and a whole range of things that are kind of after effects of that. And that's what I absolutely love to do is look at these situations and solve problems, right? Here's what I'm frustrated about. Here's what's not working. Here's what I wish was working better, and figure out how to make that work better. I love doing that for people.
Well, that was a great story. I'm a former entrepreneur. So when you were saying that, I'm so excited to hear that. Obviously, you're an entrepreneur as well, but sharing that example is so heartwarming, because I think that I've been there before, as a small business owner, and it can be frustrating, but I love that you helped make this individual's dream come true, which is the expansion. And it's like almost like the Wizard of Oz. He had it all before. And right there, he just didn't see it, but he needed an individual like yourself to kind of help guide him. So I just love that story. So John, as we're kind of getting near a little bit of the end, I would love for you to offer a few tips for our listeners. So again, thinking about retiring in X number of years, I'm on this journey, whatever. What are some tips that individuals can take action on, like in the short term, maybe a couple tips in the long term, before we ask you our final question?
Yeah, absolutely. So short term, I think hands down a really good one is go to the Social Security Administration website, ssa.gov, and set up your account, and then download your statements so that you know what's going on. There's also a ton of educational information on that site in terms of how your Social Security works and so forth. So that would be something you can do right now today, right? While you're listening to this episode, you can jump on there and set up your account. So that would be number one. I think more long term would be get clear about what you want from that. You don't just design a retirement plan or create a retirement plan. Design a life, right? What do you want? The sooner you get pretty clear about that, the easier it is to plot your path to that location, because you know where you're going. So that would be the long-term thing. I have a whole list of recommended reading. I think you can put a link in the show notes to that. It's on my website, and it's just a snapshot of book covers. It's 20 or 25 books, I think could make a huge difference to people figuring that out if they're not sure. Because a lot of people will say, right, well, I have no idea what I actually want.
Yeah.
And books is a great way to kind of help you figure that out.
Yeah.
And then I'd say the third thing would be what we talked about a little while ago. Get a second opinion, right? You don't need a reason. Just get one.
I love that. I did notice that you did have a book list, and I'm definitely going to post that in the show notes. I think that's really wonderful. I'm excited to look a little bit more deep into your book list as well for my own personal use. So the last and final question that we ask all of our guests. So John, you're very successful. You've done a lot of interesting things in your life, and you've been obviously enjoying what you're doing. But why do you get up every day and do what you do? What is your why?
That is such a great question. And I love that it's the last question, because it ties back to the first question, right? And it's I love that when I get up and go to work every day, everything I do it has the potential to make someone's life better, right? And that's what I got into this for 12 years ago now, is I wanted to do work that mattered every day. I have a background in corporate sales and spent 20 years of my life being very good at jobs I really didn't care about, right? So to be able to go to work every day and truly care about what you do and know that you're making a difference for people and that you're helping educate and make them wiser about the world and the planet they inhabit, is tremendously fulfilling. And then, of course, on the personal side, it's created this life that I was after as well, right? To be able to help people and build this life that I wanted to build is simultaneously is it's wonderful. I'll keep doing this till they nail the coffin shut.
Well, I love that answer for so many reasons, because I think in life, right, we want to wish for others what we want for ourselves. And I think you're doing that. And our podcast, Prime Life Podcast, Living Longer, Living Better. And you're trying to make and help others live longer, live better. So I just love that. So lastly, before we say goodbye, we're going to put everything in the show notes, but what's the best way individuals can get a hold of you if they would like to? And again, we'll put all your social links so they'll have access to that. We'd love to hear about that.
So the best way to get a hold of me, I actually have a landing page set up. It's talkwealthwithjohn.com. Super simple, talkwealthwithjohn.com, and that will take you to a landing page where you can go directly into my calendar and book a 30-minute free strategy session where we can talk about a review, whatever you want, and determine kind of if there's a fit for us to work together. Great, but that's not what it's for. It's really just a free 30 minutes of my time where we can brainstorm or talk about or discuss whatever your concerns might be from a financial planning standpoint. Yeah. So talkwealthwithjohn.com.
That's great, John. Well, this time went by really fast. I'm sure we're going to have you back again because we only scratched the surface of really the topics that you advise on. So with that, John, thanks so much for joining me today on the Prime Life podcast. And to our audience, download our episodes. We're on Spotify, Apple, all of that good stuff. Follow us, like us, give us feedback. Tell us what you like, what you don't like. But until next time, everyone have a wonderful day. And again, thank you, John, for joining me today on the Prime Life podcast.
Thanks a lot, Mary. Great to be here.
Remember to subscribe to the Prime Life podcast anywhere you find podcasts. You can find all of our episodes, contact information, and more on our website, primelifepodcast.com. Stay connected with us. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.